Welcome back to SwitchCorner, my name is Alex and today we're going to be taking a look at Boomerang X on the Nintendo Switch. This is the latest release from the legends that are Devolver Digital, but does this continue their publishing legacy or are you best off holding onto that cash? Well, hit subscribe if you love the Switch, as much as we all do here, join our growing family and let's get started. So story-wise, it's pretty light stuff. It throws you in with nearly zero information other than you are approaching this mysterious island. You'll learn your first few attacks and maneuvers before it really gives you anything, honestly. Eventually though, you will meet a giant millipede who delivers the story, and yes, you heard me right there, a giant millipede. Essentially though, the idea here, this was once a civilization that's been overrun by a nightmare creature of some sort and you need to stop them before they take over the rest of the world. It's decent enough, it throws in somewhat a few kind of twists along the way, but otherwise it's a very simple excuse to move you from location to location, diving deeper into this world. So gameplay, and what we have here is a first-person shooter of sorts with Boomerang in hand, like the world's most aggressive fidget spinner. The reason it's Boomerang because no matter where you throw it, it will eventually return, though it's not always going to be a direct path. What I mean by this is, it can bounce off of the environment around you as well. What I really like with this one though is it's constantly introducing to you new mechanics to the very end of the game. That's like its 4-ish hour runtime, because every few rooms you clear, a new move is then introduced. Before we do talk moves though, the concept's simple here. Like, enter arenas following a small amount of traversal that typically just allows you to practice said new moves and then defeat waves of enemies. The game's going to overwhelm you with just a ton of enemies, but the crowd is not the focus here. It's those that are highlighted with a yellow outline that you need to defeat to move on, and there's a handy countdown in the top right of the screen to coincide with your progression. It all starts though relatively simple in regards to the arenas, flat rooms, maybe a few platforms here and there at that, but before you know it there will be lethal objects above your head and below, so think like spikes and lava as a basic example. The game evolves, so at first it feels almost old school first person shooter, but then the skills, they begin to open up and you can expect to fling yourself in the direction of your weapon, you can fire explosive shots, you can cause just mass destruction on landing, and then you can even slow down time. It's no question for sure got challenge to it, this one, but it's not overly difficult, and I never died more than a couple of times before I was able to overcome these swarms of enemies. It's not like going too over the top here. It's really though learning the enemy types, this one, their offense, and then how best to counter, and that enemy count is incredibly varied, from those that fly to those that swim to spiders to huge beasts that kind of wander this world. It somewhat reminded me almost in these moments of Think Shadow of the Colossus in their scale. I really enjoyed it honestly though. It felt unique while still using a control scheme that's for most of us gonna be familiar. The only issue I really have, the slow down time maneuver feels way overpowered, and by the end game things had kind of devolved into near non-stop slow motion, and I wanted the game to have a little bit more pace to it, but the game really didn't give me any reason to not use it outside of, well, I can't wait to see what speedrunners set out to do with this one, but I am no speedrunner myself, and actually on that note as well, the game indeed features a speedrun timer in the options menu, which is gonna be a nice touch. For those curious then as well, the game does indeed feature motion controls with a few different options here. I couldn't quite get to grips with them myself. It felt okay in its movement, but it just didn't feel like it almost suited the core gameplay itself, but there's a few options there to experiment with. My personal choice out of the ones on offer would be in slow motion only. Outside of that then, expect to find a few options to extend that longevity as well, including a hard difficulty mode and ways then you can impact the gameplay, so think invincibility mode if the challenge is just a little bit too high, no shields, so one hit deaths because the game actually gradually gives you more protection with progression, and then finally no gravity. Frame rate then to close out, and while I can see how 60 frames per second would definitely benefit this one, it's hitting 30 on the Switch and it felt just fine. There were a few moments in there where the game stuttered and almost froze for a split second, but Yeah, like 95% of the time it was fine, and the issue is they were mostly self-contained to one of the many arenas. Basically, it felt responsive, and I think it delivered the intended experience. Overall for gameplay then, I had a blast. I just wish the slow motion wasn't so aggressive and so necessary. I see its purpose, but I wanted something that was a little more fast paced, and the further I got, the slower it felt like things in the game got. I wish there was actually an extra option to maybe dial down the number of enemies, just so I could go at a quicker pace. Now sure, I could have also just not used it, but why would I do that when it's clearly a core mechanic of the game and absolutely intended? Graphically then, I love it. I'm not sure how you would actually describe it. It is 3D, but it's almost got this cel-shaded vibe to its world and attacks, but then there's even kind of a dash of retro almost. Do not come here for heavy detail or anything like that, but come here for something that's incredibly stylistic, which actually seems is kind of what Devolver go on the hunt for. Occasionally though, the game then takes a step in from almost low detail to artistic, and some of the closing moments of the game, they are incredible in their enemy design. Environments then, same thing, they change quickly and it just constantly transitions you from location to location, each that feels unique thanks to handy wormholes like transport, and that kind of connects them all together. The only issue I had occasionally with a ton of enemies on screen and the kind of pixelated nature of the style, it proved a little bit difficult to work out where my next enemy was, especially when I transitioned to handheld. So audio finally, and sound effects are minimal, a few attacks here and there, a few enemy effects of course, and some occasional environmental pieces. It works, but it will not blow you away. What will impress you though, or at least it impressed me, was the music. It's absolutely incredible. It's anxiety inducing honestly, as it rarely creates a stable rhythm almost, and it's just constantly fast paced, but it's just so unique. I want to say almost a tribal vibe to it, but that's just one of the many influences here, and I suggest checking it out because the second the music kicked in, I was on the edge of my seat and part freaking out, part ready to go into battle. So yeah, overall, just incredible stuff. So overall, Boomerang X may have a terrible name, I know that, but the gameplay is solid. It's a unique spin on the first-person shooter that almost throws in part puzzler as well. You know, you're navigating these waves of enemies, and that's very much part of the strategy. You know, there's going to be also a ton of skills at your disposal, and I've only kind of touched on a few here in this video. I wouldn't necessarily come here for all-out action, though yes, the game for sure knows how to do a set piece, but this is not run and gun. This is understand your enemy, practice, and then approach, and that will not be for everyone. To wrap it up though, it looks great, it sounds great, and it's really only let down towards the end game by leaning into its slow motion abilities just a little bit too much for my liking, and its very occasional stutter and frame drop. I can get behind this one though and say Devolver, they have found another gem to bring to the Switch, and it's a great 8 out of 10 from me. With that, a shout out though to the patrons of the channel who are just going above and beyond to support SwitchCorner. It helps more than you know, so thank you all so much. Now if you do want to check that out for yourself, I have linked it in the video description down below. Then hit subscribe if you love the Switch as much as we all do here. Join our growing family, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.